It seems like everybody I know has been sending me these videos. If you've been on social, bro, you probably came across at least one. It's been called the all-white versus all-black Pro Bowl. If this is new to you, man, sorry, but it's exactly what it sounds like. It all stemmed from an extremely controversial tweet by ex-Steelers running back Rashad Mendenhall. If you easily trigger, chill, we're going somewhere smooth with this. But we have to introduce it real quick so you know what we're talking about. The tweet says, I'm sick of average white guys commenting on football. Y'all not even good at football. Can we please replace the Pro Bowl with an all-black versus all-white bowl so these cats can stop trying to teach me who's good at football? I'm better than your GOAT. Yes, this is a real tweet. It seemed like Rashad was feeling the way towards a specific person, or maybe a specific show or specific podcast, or maybe some people in his comments, but instead he kind of turned it to this all-encompassing race conversation. It's kind of uncomfortable, but surprisingly, a lot of the reactions I've seen have just sparked a healthy adult conversation. A lot of people have gone the comedy route, which is also cool, but at the same time, it's been a whole nother side to it. As the dregs of the internet and some of these politicians have gotten hold to it, it started to turn ugly real fast. But I wanted to make a video born from this idea, but in a couple key ways, flip it on its head. I figured we could look at some positions that are not just historically, but presently heavily occupied by one race. Then highlight racial outliers in each of these positions that you may or may not have ever heard of. Take obscure unicorns throughout the league's past and take the time to learn something dope about each of their careers. So I'm taking the opportunity to force people to look at a little history and flip a bad energy combo into one with good vibes. If you learn something, do me a favor, bro, and share my little video. And other than that, you know what time it is, bro. Cue the Wayne.
Yeah, you'll never know quitter, 'cause I'ma go get her.
The punter position is one of those positions where it's extremely rare to see a black player. For a lot of y'all, I'm sure the first one that comes to your mind is probably my boy Marquette King. He played the position with a flair that you usually don't see. And dude wasn't all pro back in 2016, but I said obscure players, and Marquette's pretty popular. I've done a full video on him, so let's go a different route. You might not believe this, but since the NFL started, there's only been 6 starting punters that were black, making it one of the rarest positions to see a black player occupy. But today, let me introduce you to a man named Reggie Roby. Reggie Roby was a unicorn, drafted in the 6th round of the NFL draft back in 1983. By 1984, he was the first black punter to make a Pro Bowl, and the first to be named All-Pro. He actually still owns the Dolphins team record for the longest punt ever, 77 yards. He was unique because unlike almost every other punter, he didn't do that little jump when he kicked trying to summon extra power. But while he was different from that standpoint, he also helped popularize the standard 2-step gather you see in the league today. When he retired, he left with 3 All-Pros, 3 Pro Bowls, and made the All-Decade team for the 80s. Today, punters like Presley Harvin look to follow in his footsteps. It's a small group, but the legacy of the black punter continues. Now, as rare as it is to see a black punter, it might be even more rare to see a white guy playing corner. But even though it's rare, if you my age or older, you distinctly remember this one cat from back in the day. Jason Sehorn was a California kid who played high school and college in the state of California. So in '94, when he was drafted by the New York Giants, he knew he would have to adapt to a completely new environment. But that wasn't even the biggest adaptation he'd have to make, because one of the few white corners to play in the NFL initially didn't even play cornerback in college. After being a JUCO All-American, he went to USC, and since the receiver room was crowded, they moved him to safety. He did that for 1 season, then with 1 year of eligibility left in his college career, he switched to corner, and the rest is really history. 1 year later, he was drafted in the 2nd round. He got to the league, they looked at him and moved him straight back to safety. He started rough, and it took the team until around week 8 to go back to the college film and move him to corner. This made him a unicorn at a position that to this day is mostly occupied by black players. In 1996, he had one of his best years in my opinion, or at least his best year from a statistical standpoint. So he led the Giants in interceptions, caught 5 picks, and at the same time led the entire league in forced fumbles. He had 10 takeaways in that one single season, not to mention a career high 97 tackles. The next year, he caught 6 picks looking to continue his run, but injuries would unfortunately derail his career. In today's league, I can only name a single white corner. That's Riley Moss, who plays for the Broncos. Rookie corner out of Iowa, a modern unicorn. Today's video is sponsored by DraftKings, an official partner of the NFL. College fans, it's bowl season, and the latest offer from DraftKings to have you celebrating a win soon as you make your first bet. See, today I'm partnering up with DraftKings Sportsbook to tell you that right now, all new customers will receive $150 in bonus bets instantly when they place their first $5 wager. You can sign up now using promo code FlemLo. Now, if you already signed up for DraftKings like me, you can get what they call a no sweat bet. On a no sweat bet, you can get a bonus bet back if your same game parlay ends up not hitting. If you're a fan of multiple teams and want to bet on them all, you can combine bets together for a shot at bigger payouts. Now, if sports betting is not available in your state, you can still join the fun with DraftKings Daily Fantasy. You can compete in different contests and win real money. So if betting is not available in your state, that's a good alternative. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now, and new customers who use promo code FlemLo and bet $5 will get $150 in bonus bets instantly, right there on the spot. That's promo code FlemLo, only at DraftKings Sportsbook. When you think of black players on special teams, you probably think of the return man way before you think of the guys kicking. But what if I told you this next player, he actually did both? Bro, this man was a place kicker and a return specialist. Like, what the f? That's so unique. I love it. Eugene Mingo has a pretty unique story. It's kind of crazy, to be honest. Let me give you the short version. So his cousin talked him into playing football as a kid, and he tried it, didn't like it, and he quit. No big deal. Well, his cousin was pissed, bro, called him a quitter, and shortly after, his cousin tragically passed away. Fueled by that, Eugene returns to the football field with a newfound purpose. He's ready to take it all the way, and he never wanted to be called a quitter again. But when his mom got sick, he really had no choice. So he quit both football and he quit school to take care of his mom, who was terminally ill. Years go by, his mom passes, and he returns to high school and decides once again to give his football thing a shot just to see where it would take him. As a kid, he was okay, but nothing special on the field. But now, out of nowhere, dude could just do it all. He could run, he could kick, he could catch, he could throw. But this wasn't the launch point, even though it seems like it would be. But no, he actually drops out of school again, this time permanently, and joins the Navy. Plays ball for the Navy team, and they find out he's a star. That runs its course. He's discharged and goes back to Ohio. All that momentum, gone. Back to square one. But in 1960, the Denver Broncos were formed. This is pre-merger, so at the time there was an AFL team. So Gene read in the paper that a former Army player had signed to this brand new AFL team. So he whips out a pen and writes the Broncos a letter. They read the letter, and with no film, no tryout, no nothing, they give him a contract. He's in the league now. Probably not the most efficient way of scouting, but hey man, sometimes things just work out. In his first game, he took a punt back for a touchdown, then caught his breath and kicked the extra point. He led the American League in total points multiple times in his career. You can do that when you're the kicker, the return man, and the running back. These days in the league, everybody's so specialized. You don't usually see players get to show this type of versatility. But when you do, think of Eugene Mingo. Now, running backs is kind of tricky. Literally one of the best backs, maybe the best running back right now, is white. It's kind of funny because Christian McCaffrey's dad, Ed McCaffrey, was a dog who played a primarily black position back in the day. So this family's been kind of like breaking the mold, breaking down stereotypes for years at this point. But after C-Mac, there's not a ton of notable white running backs. Rex Burkhead, everybody knows Peyton Hillis. Mike Alstott is another one that you've most likely heard of. But I want to talk about somebody a little more obscure. Oddly enough, most of y'all kind of know who this person is, or you know a part of who he is. Here's a quick highlight from his second career.
So you are going bust.
If a 5th or 6th round grade, if you have a compensatory pick, grabbed him there. But not in the first round.
I'm sorry, I got a question. Are you saying that Johnny Manziel may not even be worth a pick in the first 3 rounds?
Oh, I wouldn't. The project is so massive. There are so many major flaws.
So what are your thoughts about people who believe he should be the first overall pick in the draft?
Listen, you know, obviously it's not a perfect science, but I think people who will take him in the first round.
I'm saying first overall.
If you took it first overall, I would think that staff would be gone in 2 years, and whoever made that pick would be gone in 2 years. You make that pick, we got to question your evaluating players and their transition and their ability to transition to the National Football League very highly.
Merril Hoge, with all due respect, you have never, ever been more wrong in your assessment of a football player than you just were about Johnny Manziel.
Before Merril Hoge would become an example of why being right about sports takes doesn't matter, he was a college running back at Idaho State University. During his playing days, he set an NCAA record with 2,113 all-purpose yards. He could run it, he can catch it, and he returned. And bro, he finished his career with almost 5,500 all-purpose yards and scored 31 touchdowns. Then in 1987, he was drafted by the Steelers in the 10th round at the time. I think it was 12 rounds back then. He wasn't a superstar, but had 3-4 really solid seasons, including 2 where he surpassed 1,000 all-purpose yards. He could catch it out the backfield, led the team in receptions one year. So again, not a superstar, but pretty damn solid. Sadly though, his career ended on a pretty scary note. It's unbelievable and extremely believable at the same time. So he stayed with the Steelers from 1987 to 1994. That was the team that drafted him. In 94, he signed with the Bears, second act of his career. He had to retire like 6 games later. Due in part to his running style, Merril Hoge suffered multiple concussions throughout his career. And definitely no pun intended, but shortly after signing with the Bears, it all came to a head. He suffered yet another really bad concussion, but only 5 days later, he was cleared to return to the field. The only problem was, he never saw a doctor. To be fair, they ain't know as much about concussions back then. But bro, the doctor cleared this man to play over the phone. For the young cats watching this, no, they did not have FaceTime. He listened to his voice and was like, yeah, you good. So like I said, bro, he technically never saw a doctor, but was cleared to return to play after only 5 days. Then a few weeks later, he got another concussion, but this was the worst one of his career by far. He actually stopped breathing, bro, and had to be resuscitated. In some ways, it's similar to the Damar Hamlin incident. He had to spend 48 hours in intensive care unit. Fortunately, he pulled through but suffered bad memory loss. He had to learn to read again. He suffered headaches and confusion, scary stuff, and there was a lot less information back then. So he was actually forced into retirement after he was actually checked out by a doctor and they told him one more concussion could cause permanent brain damage. One of the sneaky positions you probably really don't think about as being held down by majority white players is center. I went through PFF's preseason list of all the centers, and only 2 out of 32 were actually black. Now there were 2 more who were mixed race, so if we include them, that puts us at a total of 4 out of 32 centers. Legendary football coach Paul Williams Bear Bryant was head coach at Alabama from 1958 to 1982. During his run at head coach, he won 6 national titles, and the last 2 came with the help of center Dwight Stevenson. Bear Bryant, who was the head coach of one of the most successful college programs of all time for 24 years, out of all the players he saw during that entire time, he said Dwight Stevenson was the best center he ever coached. Dwight went on to the league back in 1980. He was drafted in round 2 by the Miami Dolphins. By 1983, he made his first All-Pro team and never missed it again for the rest of his career. From 1983 through 1987, this dude made All-Pro every single year. He made the Pro Bowl every year. That was never even a question. They said he was so dominant that he hardly ever missed a block. He was so cold that his Dolphin teams gave up the fewest sacks in the whole league for 6 straight years. That helped the Dolphins get the 2 Super Bowls during his run, but unfortunately they lost both. Then in 1987, an unfortunate knee injury ended his career prematurely. But with just 7 years of work that was stacked on his resume. Bro, that 7 years of work was so damn dominant that he made the 100th anniversary all-time team. Now, I started this segment off with a list of centers from PFF, and coming in, I didn't even know that would come full circle. But just so happened, every year PFF gives out an award to the player they consider the best regardless of position. And they call that award the Dwight Stevenson Award. And they actually started this way back in 2012. They provided a little modern analysis on Dwight's game. Here's a couple things they had to say about the Hall of Fame center. A center that started only 87 games before being cut down by injury, but was so clearly transcendent that he was still voted into the Hall of Fame. This is the Gale Sayers of offensive linemen, and you only have to watch just a few minutes of tape to see that he was something a little bit special. The last position that we focusing on today is another one that might be a little bit sneaky. Like maybe you've noticed or maybe you haven't, but most of the D tackles happen to be black. You probably seen cats during their black players versus white players rosters, and you probably noticed something when you look along the D line. It's all edge players. No nose tackles or 3 techs. It's kind of crazy. I never really paid attention to recently. I probably didn't have to go back this far for today's D tackle, but I chose Keith Millard, first round pick from 1984. Despite being drafted in '84 by the Minnesota Vikings, Millard actually played that season in the USFL. I'm assuming they offered a big bag like what happened with Steve Young. So he went and got that real quick, but the Vikings still had his rights. His first year in the USFL, dude had 12 sacks from D tackle. You thinking 12 sacks is cool, but it's not the NFL. Well, the next year in the NFL, during his rookie season, he recorded 11 sacks from the D tackle position. So after 1 year in the USFL, he'd return to the NFL and play out his career with the Minnesota Vikings. 3 different times in his NFL career, he had double-digit sacks, but went off in '89. That year, he set the league record from the D tackle position. Y'all ready for this number, bro? 18 sacks. Bro, it took 30 years and the greatest D tackle that we've ever seen to break that record. So obviously, 18 sacks got him Defensive Player of the Year. And kinda like the guy who broke his record years later, Millard was one of the most feared players in the NFL. So if you never heard of him, now you have. So that was 6 obscure former NFL stars who didn't fit neatly into their stereotype. I learned a lot doing this vid, bro, and I hope y'all did too. Hopefully this was a fun spin on a somewhat uncomfortable conversation, but in a cool way, to keep all of these holiday vibes vibing.